Hello, I'm Brian Fox. This is I Hate Rock Music, and I'm going to do another obscure band. That's kind of my bread and butter, and I've done some other types of videos quite a bit. So I'm going to get back to talking about these wonderful obscure records, and kind of like the Fields record, which I just talked about in another video. Haystacks Balboa, another one of those ones I got for about 50 cents, and it had a really cryptic cover, as you can see from the thumbnail, and so it was very attractive right away. And then of course when I turn the record over, they just have that look. They look evil. They look wasted. They all have long hair, and great song title. So once again, I had no idea what I was getting into, but one of those records I bought in about 1971, 72 went out of print pretty quick. It was on Polydor and came out in 1971, September of 1971. So I got it maybe a year after that, and of course it didn't really sell that well when it was released. But anyway, the band was named after a pro wrestler, so we have an explanation for that cryptic name. Came out of Queens, New York in 1969, so they had a decent lifespan, 1969 to 1971. And the band was Mark Mayo on guitar, Mark Babani on drums, Lloyd Landisman on keyboards, Mark Pollitt on bass, and Bruce Scott on vocals. And the guitar player, Mark Mayo, was very highly regarded in the New York scene back then, considered one of the best guitarists around. And you can really see it on the album. He really delivers, and it's one of the things that really makes the album special. And one of the other weird things is that Bruce Scott, he was their second vocalist, and there's actually a Haystacks Balboa website, which is really wonderful. It gives the whole history of the band, has a lot of graphics. Turns out they had a singer originally who left the band, and then they got Bruce Scott. And his claim to fame was he was in a very bizarre uh, psychedelic band with early electronics by Wendy Carlos. And the fact that he went from that band to a hard rock band like Haystacks Balboa is pretty curious. And if you are interested, I did a video on the Child Herald band. They only released one single, but it's so striking. I had to do a whole video on that. So look that up on my channel if you're interested. One of the other things that makes the record great is it's recorded really well, and it turns out Shadow Morton produced it, and he was mostly known for producing the second New York Dolls album, for instance, but he had a background in producing a lot of girl groups, and so really interesting to see him show up on this record. But he did a great job, and the band came together out of members of two other Queens, New York bands, the Tangerine Puppets and Umbrella. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's anything recorded by either of those bands, but their names certainly are intriguing. And so they originally had a single named Charles Lane. They did a bunch of demos. They're on the Haystacks Balboa site, and there's even a couple of non-LP songs on the site. So those are great to hear after all these times. Oh, I'm sorry. The original singer was actually named Larry Cannon, and they were recorded at Charles Lane Studios. And there's some really great stuff on the record. Once again, a lot of odd elements in it, and very eccentric, but one of those records that really has a payoff. And I had no idea what I was getting into, but when I got it home, I was thrilled. And I want to add too that this is another one of those bands from New York that features organ and keyboards, and I find that a lot of bands from New York during that time period, like Bull Angus and Mountain and Blue Oyster Cult, all featured keyboards, and that seems to be something that was very popular in bands from New York at that time. And so that's an interesting aspect of. Certainly, there were rock bands around the country, and certainly in Europe, most notably, that used a lot of keyboards. But it seems to be something in that region that marked a lot of these bands. So we find out that Haystacks Balboa actually got a pretty high profile. They did shows with Cactus, 10 years after Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath, The Faces, Savoy Brown, Mountain, Santana, and Grateful Dead. So they definitely got a lot of exposure, but I would imagine that the label Polydor didn't do much promotion by them, and I can only imagine that they were a pretty good live act. They're really tight on record, and everybody's really good at their respective instruments. And Bruce Scott is a pretty unhinged singer, and I always like that. So that really adds a mania, a manic quality to this record that really makes it special for me. So there's hard rock numbers like Spoiler and Sticky Fingers. Spoiler was chosen as the single off the album, and they have everything you'd want from a hard rock band. Um, the organ work is killer. The vocals are unhinged and just spectacular guitar work. And then there's and another one called Bruce's Twist. So there's a lot of really short, snappy, relatively fast hard rock numbers on here, and then stuff gets kind of weird, and I like that too. This record really has a doom quality to it that I find irresistible. But there's a song called "Children of Heaven" that is kind of a slow dirge and has a maniacal laugh in it, and very dark, very doom laden. Um, and then there's another one called "Ode to the Silken Man" that's got a lot more complex arrangement, and once again, a lot of weirdness to it. So this band has a lot of interesting qualities to it, and very, very unique. And there's even a part with somewhat spoken words that's just very, very cryptic and very, very dark and mysterious. And so that really adds a lot to the record as well. And as I mentioned, all the cutouts I bought in the old days, records like Fields and Haystacks Balboa were some of my favorites because they really delivered, had really cool songs and great guitar work. And that's kind of what I'm always looking for. And for a lot of my younger uh, subscribers, if you don't know what cutouts are, I did a whole video on what cutouts were. For me, it was heaven. Back in the 1970, 1971, and 72, you'd go into a department store, and usually right up front, they'd have a bunch of portable tables set up with just open boxes of records. And so you really were in for a treat because you got to go in and just flip through all these records that were the ones that were either put out of print really quick because they didn't sell, or what they called overstock. So in the cutouts, the labels expected albums to sell a lot more copies, and they didn't. So there's a lot of copies of MC5 Kick Out the Jams, and there was a lot of copies of Steppenwolf at Your Birthday Party, and a lot of copies of the Doors Soft Parade because the labels were expecting big hits, printed a lot of copies of them, so a lot of them ended up in cutout bins. And records like that were usually about $1.99, but a lot of these really obscure ones, they'd be three for a buck, or 44 cents, or 59 cents. And so it was a real treat. It's one of the most exciting parts of my early youth and growing up and discovering music was the land of the unknown when you go through cutout bins. And so records like this that are highly collectible, I was buying super cheap back then. And so even as a young rock fan, um, I got to get into a lot of these records, 40, 50 years ago, and have been enjoying them ever since. But for you people out there that haven't heard records like that, and in this case, Haystacks Balboa, if you like that early 70s hard rock, you're in for a real treat because Haystacks Balboa is one of the best. And as always, I'll put the link below. Check them out. So thanks for watching. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.